Okay, right. So for this presentation, we'll be going through memory forensics. So I think me and the other John, we are not really good at it. But I think we try to gather what we know, and then we try to make it such that it's easy for people to pick up lah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's more like
So
a beginner crash course, I'd say.
it might not be as long as most workshops but let's hope that the rest of them can still grab some stuff that you are saying lah. All right, so I'm just gonna start. So for today, first we'll introduce ourselves in better detail. Then we'll go through what memory forensics is, some of the key processes, I think probably like a playbook of how maybe we should tackle CTF questions using volatility, as well as some demos, summary, and follow-up resources that you guys can look at if you are more interested in this topic lah. Yeah, if not, without further ado, it's me and other John. So it's very confusing because you're both wearing gray shirts and both have the same color of specs. But yeah, so I'm the shorter John. Then taller John is the other John. Yeah, so
The great thing is you can't tell the difference right now.
yeah, same as well. Yeah, so if this presentation goes well, then both the Johns are great. If not, both the Johns are bad. So it's easy to tell in that aspect. Yeah. All right. So without further ado, let me just dive into the next part. So I think the first question to ask is what exactly is memory forensics lah? So for memory forensics, what it is that you are actually dumping out the contents of the memory given that very stasis moment. So why this is important is because there are some stuff like, for example, Fowler's malware, or that may be using WMIC or using PowerShell that is not physically storing a file artifact inside the hard drive. So for that, you cannot just take out the physical assets, but you also need to dump out the memory. Another thing is to also see whether the attack is successful and to figure out certain vectors. I think that one we will cover a little bit later. And the third one is we try to see whether there are any working theories, because I think for CTF is they roughly give you a rough guide of what exactly you should search for. But for ops experience is that usually you triage the thing first, then you will figure out that maybe from the firewall or the router there's certain impasse, or there's certain TTPs, for example, that the attackers use. Then from there, you can use the memory dump to kind of refine your search, so you don't just dump out everything, because if not, memory forensics is a very time-consuming task. So you want to reduce the amount of time spent on that as well. Yeah. So the first process when you start off with memory dumps and memory forensics is that you need to acquire the said memory. So there are many factors as to how or why you should take out memory, but I think I highlighted three important factors. The first one is stability. So it's whether you want to just take out the physical memory, or do you want to take out the actual the physical files itself, or you want to take out the actual memory. Because if you do take a snapshot in that moment, the memory while you're taking that snapshot is prone to changes and it's prone to instability. So is it really something that you suspect to be Fowler's, or something that you need further confirmation via a memory analysis? If not, it might not always be recommended to do memory forensics. The second one is locality. So for some of it, you are restricted by the fact that you cannot access the thing, because maybe there's no GUI, or the fact that there is no for some reason the facility is closed, like you cannot just plug in your cable or whatsoever. Like there's no hardware, there's no physical access. So in that case, you might need to do some form of remote acquisition. And thirdly is whether there's admin access, because for some of them, for example, for Windows especially, like if you want to take out the hyper.sys file and you want the rights to copy, you will need some form of admin access. So you also need to check whether it's provided for. And if it's not provided for, can you get it legally or illegally? Do you need to use like a prevest tool? Or is this is the person that you're investigating, is he being compliant? Does he give you full credential, or he doesn't know what's going on? Yeah, so those are some stuff that you need to consider when you take memory from the victim. So next is after considering everything and you decide that, okay, let's go and take out the memory. What are some stuff that you can do? So the first one is you can use certain software. For me, my favorite software is Dump It. So Dump It is basically you have a client instance, then you use Dump It, you send it to your server instance that will catch everything. You usually use like maybe some like RC4 cipher, then the data will travel through, you get everything, you unencrypt it, and then that's basically your memory dump. There's also stuff like FTK imager, and of course most forensics do like encase, and I think there's one more, but it slipped my mind now. Yeah, so you can use certain software. Another way is for Windows, you can use the hyper.sys file under your system drive. The C Windows system32 hyper.sys. So that is basically when you hibernate your file, all the memory will be put into your hyper file.sys lah. And thirdly is that if you are working from a VM, which is what most of us are doing, is that technically you can just take the vmem file from VMware, assuming that you do use VMware. If not, if you use VBox, you might need to dump out the memory as it is, just from the two methods that we mentioned above lah. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to zoom in a little bit more on a memory forensics tool to analyze lah. So we choose volatility. So there are three reasons why we chose them. So the first one is that it's written in Python. So everybody knows Python. So you can extend it, you can use different libraries. Because some of them, for example, the screenshot library requires a Python imaging library. And I think it shows how flexible it is lah. The second one is that it can run Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever distro that you're interested in, probably can run as long as you know there is Python, that Python can run on it as well, because it's cross-platform. And thirdly, we didn't really have enough time to explore more stuff. So that's the reason why we chose volatility. Yeah, but volatility is very strong. So I don't think so you'll really be at a loss just to master this tool alone for beginners just like us. But if not, there are some other stuff like backlight and SIF. I think SIF is by Sense, where you can use it to acquire memory data and to do certain form of analysis on it. That's something you can choose to explore. Yeah. All right. So this is going to be a very, very brief breakdown. If you don't remember whatever I'm saying, because I'm a bit too excited, if you don't remember whatever I'm saying, you can just remember this slide. So you'll probably send these slides at the end of the presentation as well. So there are 6 key factors as to how you should usually look at how to analyze a memory forensics CTF question. So the first one is you need to do a certain form of triaging. So is it a Windows or Linux, or what profile to use? So for profiles, we'll talk a little bit more later. Secondly, is you need to check whether there are any running processes, because we assume that they are fileless in certain ways. And even if they're not fileless, it could be a process that's closed already. And then from there, we can see whether that's suspicious. Third is to see whether there are any command line stuff that is being run. I mean, for anybody who has done pen tests, you do basically everything in command line lah. So if you can capture that, you can see stuff like, for example, a netcat instance running, you can see something like your WinPs running, for example. So that will be very evident of certain privilege escalation or certain vectors that the attackers choose to use. The fourth one is network connections. So is it connecting to somewhere outside its local network? The fifth one is there any weird DLLs or weird processes or weird memory stuff that's going on? So you can choose to dump out the memory file and the DLLs to see whether there's anything suspicious, or you can even upload it to VirusTotal to see is there any signatures or hash that you can kind of identify it to be a little bit not 不对劲啦, yeah. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is that we need to do a certain form of triaging. So there is a module provided for this by Volatility. So it's called image info. So as you can see from here, you will do image info, and then they will give a list of suggested profile. Just to mention as well that a lot of memory forensics in general is a bit trial and error. So if this profile doesn't work, you do the next one. It's more of an art than a science in that aspect. Yeah. So you just go routinely and see whether all of this works. And if it doesn't work, that one I will let John explain later on what to do. Yep. These are some brief steps as to what to do if it doesn't work. John will go in greater detail later. What you need to know is that just now in the previous slide, they talked about something called profiles. So profiles is basically telling volatility that these are certain data structures and certain debug symbols. So that's where you should take certain information from. So later, if you were to see, there's some stuff that do roughly similar things. Like I think there's one that is command and con scan, if I'm not wrong. Those, they do very similar things, but they take the data from different places. So these places are identified via the kernel data structure offsets and the debug system lah. Okay, so next, going on to step 2, you do something called process enumeration. So PS list is a very basic module to look at basic program listing. So usually when we do run this tool, I will look at the exit. So I think this one a bit, it's not very sus lah, but if there's a certain exit sign there, probably we can see that maybe the attacker left, like, or quit the program already. Maybe this could be post-attack, the attacker has left the program. Then this will be suspicious for me, that I can further take the PID and do some form of memory or process dumping. Next is PS3. It will then look at the hierarchy of it. So for example, I don't think there's anything weird here, but if you see a CMD spawn Microsoft Paint that spawns like some netcat, then you know there's this weird hierarchy thing that's going on. You know that's super suspicious already. Yeah, or you see like Elsa's being spawned by like command.exe or conhost spawning Elsa's. Because Elsa's by right is a root process. It does all your credentials and stuff. And some attackers tend to use and spoof Elsa's because it's a legit program that checks all your authentication. So if you see any of this out of place, it's also a very telltale sign that something is wrong lah. So the next one is PSX view. So this is useful because it does everything. It does PS list, PS scan, some of these other stuff like sessions or CS, RSS. Then from there, all you need to do apparently is to just see, because I'm quite noob at this, you just need to see which one is false, then that's suspicious. Yeah, I mean, there's more to this. Later, I will link a book, a PDF that explains a lot more on how they even derive all these structures and what they actually mean, all these modules. But for the purposes of this, just take note that if it's false, then it could be very highly evident that something is off lah. This basically means that this process is not found in this when this module is being run. Yeah, so if the more false you see, the more suspicious it is lah. So the next thing you'll do is command enumeration. So the first one very basically is we will see this is called CMD line. So you basically check for each process what is the command line that is being run. So for example, all of these are very normal because somehow the mem dumps I did were all quite normal. Yeah, but maybe if you do see elsas.exe, but it has a dash NVLP 4444, then you know that that's obviously not Elsas, for example. By seeing these very minute details, you can try to, and if you have enough experience, you can try to see whether this is a program that runs certain command line arguments that you know that are used in certain attacker tools or certain enumeration tools. Then from there, you know that whether it is suspicious or not suspicious. The next thing to do also is to look at something called consoles. So consoles, they take this thing from console information. So console information is basically, they look, the technical details, they look at CRSS. CRSS has certain offsets, and one of it is console information. The next one is command history. So they are in this tree lah. So basically this one, in this tree, it will store all of this information, like what is the exact command line that is being run, what is the output. This is particularly important if you want to check whether attack is being run successfully. So for example, is that let's say you have this process that is being run and maybe exploit, but they suddenly got this huge error message. So you know that that process was run, but it was run unsuccessfully. So maybe the attacker could have tried something else. So this is usually very indicative of how the attacker moves. For command history, to be honest, I've never really found it useful. But it's always like what I say is just to double check lah. Is if one side doesn't work, you can try the other plugin or tool. All right, the next one is NetScan. I forgot to change the title. Next one is NetScan. So for NetScan, there are a lot of network enumeration tools for volatility, but the only one you need to know is NetScan, because got some like SocScan, ConScan, all of it is for XP and below, and I'm assuming your system doesn't run then. So yeah, so basically this will show, it's a bit like a netstat. So it will show who is exactly running what's the PID, where is the foreign address. If you see anything going to some funny address that is not within your local system, and the owner is a bit iffy, then you roughly know that something is wrong as well. Yeah. Next, the important thing also is to look at certain DLLs. So DLLs is dynamic link libraries, basically stuff that you link together with your programs, you bundle it together. So they might have certain libraries that they import from them that are slightly suspicious in nature. So even though, let's say there are some processes that might be benign, but the DLLs that they hook onto may not be. There could be certain DLL hijacking. So these are certain ways for you to check. If you see a PID that is suspicious, you can view it from here. For example, this is suspicious 340. Then you can see all the DLLs to see if anything is out of place. Especially if you do know that this is a certified Windows signed process. Then if there's any funny DLL that is not supposed to be here and is here, very indicative of something that's going wrong. There's also DLL dump. So for this is that you can choose to dump out everything, but typically is hopefully by this point you will have triaged it to a certain process that's suspicious. Then you will just dump out all the DLLs and put for certain static analysis, for example, via your IDA, or for example, you put into a sandbox and see how it runs. Yeah. Next one is proc dump. For processes as well, you can dump out its process as well with a certain, you can kind of specify which PID it's running, as well as you can dump out the memory as well. For me, what I like to do with proc dump and mem dump is I like to dump it out, then I use strings. Or for proc dump, I like to just run it to see what happens or statically analyze it. So for this one, for mem dump, it has worked in the past where I just mem dump the thing, I strings it, then I roughly figured out the actual, because there's some strings that inside that it's like very indicative of certain tools that I've used before or seen before. So that's how I roughly tell that I think this could be replicating the functions of this certain tool that I've seen in a while before. Yeah. So next I'll pass time over to John. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, so I'll just be covering on a little bit on profiles lah. So mainly I'm talking about Linux profiles. So in the case just now, right, when you run image info and then you just wait for like 3-5 minutes and you don't get anything, it's most likely gonna be a Linux profile. So first thing you can do, right, is check whether if you're lucky lah. If you're lucky, right, you can find the pre-built profiles on the Volatility GitHub lah. So these are already pre-built. You don't have to build your own profiles, which is great. But if you're unlucky, okay, so let's just say you're unlucky. Next slide. Okay, so we will have to build the images from scratch. So, oh yeah, yep, here, this is the profiles page. Yep. So you have to build the images from scratch. So first thing we can do, right, is we want to find out what's the boot image. So like what kind of kernel information do we have on the memdump file. So we can just grab for the boot image, get the OS information, and then we go and find the particular build for the OS and install it onto a VM. Okay, so as what was mentioned just now, profiles are made out of the kernel data structures and debug symbols. So to build these profiles, right, there are two things we need. First, we need something called a module.dwarf file. And another thing is also we need a system.map file, which stores all the symbols of the system. Okay, next slide. So I'll just run through the step-by-step process. I'll go into a demo later, a very short demo. So first thing, we need to install the required OS on a VM. So just make sure it's the correct build. Okay. So we just check whether it's the correct build by using uname A. If we're using a Linux-based operating system lah. So there's some things we need to install. We need to install the kernel headers and or generic headers depending on what kind of distribution you're using. So this allows us to have the kernel information to build this profile. We also need GCC and DOF tools. Some distributions use different libraries. This can be found later in a link that I'll share lah. So what we can do after that is we can clone Volatility, and then we can go use the command make in one of the subfolders lah, which they already has like a make file prepared. So next slide. So after we have done that, right, we just pray that everything works, because this is quite annoying. So let's just say the distribution you're running, right, and then you just try to install the kernel headers, but it just doesn't give you the correct kernel headers for that particular mem dump I was working on yesterday. This will happen, and then it will take forever lah. It still doesn't work for me. I'm very sad. But okay, let's just say that your kernel headers are right, like in the correct instance lah. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so when you run make already, right, you notice that a module.dot file will be spawned in your created lah in your current directory. So we can also check /boot for system.map file. So what you can do now, right, is just take these two things, zip them together, okay, and then we just transfer this out of our VM into our CTM machines, where we can use it as a plugin to Volatility. Okay, next. Okay, so how do we use this, right? We can just copy this zip file and put it in this folder in Volatility, or you can just put it in any folder that can be accessed, and then you can specify the flag plugins to that directory, and then you can use that plugin, that profile already. So the profile name you will call, right, is whatever the zip file is called. Yep. So you should be able to see it when you run volatility.pyh lah, the available profiles. Okay, moving on. Okay, this enough of the profiles. So speaking of Linux, right? Also Mac lah. Honestly, the commands between these different operating systems will be a little bit different as expected, because of the nature of how the OS runs. So next slide. This is just quite general lah. So just do note that when you're using different profiles, right, the commands will be slightly different. For example, you won't have CMD scan on Linux, you will have like Linux bash instead. So all these kind of nitty-gritty details on the commands, right, they can be found on the GitHub page for Volatility lah. So there's also a description on how to use them. So yeah, this is just a very brief portion on this, which you can find out more in the link. Okay, next slide. So yeah, what if everything doesn't work? So we can Hail Mary. Okay, next slide. So these are some various tools that are kind of random, and they don't really make a lot of sense, but sometimes you can find like important information within them lah. So I'll just walk through some of them lah. So first up, right, we got environmental variables lah. So certain challenges, they may just store important information in their environmental variable, depending on the hints they give lah. So sometimes you can look up for maybe some flags here, I don't know, or some other information that can allow you to access other parts of the memory lah. Okay, then next we have hash dump also. Okay, so hash dump is quite straightforward. It literally just stores the user ID and the password hash lah. So some easy challenges may just ask you for the password hash, and then your answer is here. Okay, next. Screenshot, right? Okay, so this actually uses the Python PIL tool lah. So it basically just generates like the window, like a literally screenshot lah of the windows that were open during the time there was like this mem dump was taken. So you can access these photos when you dump them out. They'll be like shown in the photo there lah. Okay, then next we also have sessions which just describes the user logon sessions. And also some other stuff that's not in the slides just before we move on. We also have IE history. Later there will be one demo that I think touches a little bit on IE history, if I'm not wrong. IE history basically shows like it's not just Internet Explorer, it's your navigation of your file explorer system. So you can see what files were accessed, whatever was open. So although quite random, it might be quite useful to take a look into IE history. There's also file scan, which can be an overload of information, but if you know what you're looking for, it can be very useful. So basically it just throws out a list of all the files on the system. If you know what you're looking for, maybe a certain file extension or what, you can easily grab and then see whether you got relevant information that you can go on from there, like dumping out the file, perhaps. Yeah, so that's all for the first part. Now I'll hand the time back to John for a demo.
All right. So we will start with some demos. If you guys did manage to try the try this challenge before the site went down, then you will know what I'm talking about. If not, we shall go through this very, I put this in front because it's really very simple challenge. So for this challenge, basically, I'm going to read the description. The members of the keepers, some entity, got their hands on one of the GDC computers. They created some memdump as they believe it might contain some juicy information. Yeah, so the title itself kind of spoils what exactly it's supposed to do. So for me, when I look at the challenge, is I need to go and see based on the words they give, is there any sort of things that they might give hint to lah. So for example, is not even for memory forensics. I think there was this challenge I did was called mountains and meta mountains. Then from there you could immediately tell that it was either some really bad joke or it's about metadata. Yeah, so from there, this kind of tells me that it's about passwords. So for passwords, I will either look at hash dump, or I think I was looking a little bit further. I think I was thinking a bit too much. I'm like, wow, maybe CDDC trying to throw me again like the previous year. Maybe it could be some password in the memory or some suspicious program or some like very far away vector. But anyway, something concerning passwords lah. So first thing to do, like always, is to triage. So we triage it. It's a Windows 7. After this, I choose to do a hash dump lah. But I realized that I do crack station on them and it doesn't work lah. So obviously this is not the vector. So like every good Singaporean student that doesn't know what's going on, or any CS student, for example, I just Google. Then the first result was LSA dump law. So I just, okay, LSA dump, that makes sense. So just try lah. Then LSA dump out. There is this, if I'm not wrong, this is a registry. This is a registry key. If I am not wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. But this is registry key, and then this is the flag. Then tada, here flag. Okay, so that was it lah. It was very, if this shows anything, is that you don't have to overthink, and this just shows basically it's just a one step sort of challenge lah. So the next demo I will do is one from MemLabs. I think this was particularly interesting. Yeah, and I think I will share implications past this CTF for real world applications. So this one basically the sister computer crash, then they recover the mem dump, but she was trying to draw something. So draw something. I mean, I like to doodle of MS Paint, so that was immediately what I was thinking of. So I just thinking of dumping out any image processing thing that I see. Maybe it's like Windows Media Player or VLC or something. So that was my plan, my game plan going into this. So identified it is a Windows 7. Thankfully, don't need to build any profiles. Then from there, I look at it. Thankfully for me, there is a MS Paint. I don't know if this thing is popping up, but there's a MS Paint here. So from there, my first immediate step is to just dump out the memory. But so usually I don't really have a process for this, so I will just strings it. But obviously that wasn't the direction to go because you're dealing with pixels and offsets and all. So what actually I went to search up on was that technically you could convert this into a you could convert this into a certain dump DMP, a .data file. Then from there you can put it inside GIMP and you can recreate the image, which I think to me was freaking cool lah. So this one, it took a while. I think it took around like 15 minutes because the slider was getting a bit hopeless. But just to show a little bit of like my process through this is that around the height of about 10,000, we start to see like some dots. Then I was thinking maybe like, because the thing was, you cannot really see, and I don't really want to show it here because it's going to take too long. But basically the dots were going from left to right. So I was thinking if the dots can go from left to right, maybe they can all like perfectly line up in one certain pattern, then that will be words. So I was right lah. So technically after we adjust the width a bit, it does look like words, but very badly written words and obviously flipped. So using the same original program, MS Paint, we just flip the thing. Then we get this flag, good boy, good girl. I think this challenge was interesting for me because technically, if you do find certain screenshots of what the attacker was doing and then they left it on the system, you can probably recreate it. Or if you are some form of red teamer or pen tester and you see someone, I think maybe I used to do it when I was really bad at cyber ethical or cyber hygiene. Maybe I would screenshot my credentials. I think there's one example, it's not shown here. You can probably make out what exactly the credentials were, what exactly was typed into the certain input box that you screenshotted. So that could be very useful and in identifying sensitive information, because usually people won't think of this. Yep. So I think before I pass on to John for another round of demonstrations, I think I'd like to demonstrate a little bit on like what are the differences between doing CTF and doing some form of real life ops for memory forensics. I think I've had the pleasure of doing both lah. So for CTF, usually you use some sort of obscure module. I think he's mentioned IE history. I think I got see some stuff from clipboard before. It's just very, very weird, very weird areas for you to get data from. I think it's not very natural. And it's usually either base 64 encoded, or I think there was one challenge where you had to take out the password, then you have to do some rod cipher, then you have to XOR it with some other string that you found from some other module. Yeah, so there's a lot of this kind of thing, and there's no emphasis really on network, which I think is very, very important if you're talking about the cyber kill chain in particular. For when you talk about real life, you usually need some rough time indication. I think like all blue teaming is that we are always stuck in way too much information. So you need to roughly know what exactly you need to search for in the mem dump already. I think once you kind of dive into the mem dump without not knowing what you exactly are looking for, and everything is time critical, right? Then it gets a bit dicey lah. Yeah, you also tend to focus a lot on IOCs. There are some stuff like mail find that we didn't really focus on here because this is more CTF based. But these are usually tools that blue teamers or forensic people will use lah, or some network related stuff. And also registry is very important. See persistency, see it can track a lot of stuff. For example, all the users, who was the last one to access this computer, all very, very useful stuff. And of course, usage of other tools. I think the important thing is that even for CTFs also, likely if it's a very complicated CTF question, the question doesn't just start, it starts with memory dump, but it might not just exist in that form. It could go towards static binaries or some stuff that you need to analyze and pick apart on your own lah. Yeah. So next I'll pass my time over to John.
Okay, thanks, John. It's back to me. Okay, so here, right, just do a very, very quick demo on how to create a profile. But mainly the steps were already introduced earlier on. Okay, so next slide. So what I said just now lah. So if we take too long on image info, we can just go and grab for the file. The boot image lah, sorry, the file. Okay, then next slide, we can see, right, from this screen grab I got, okay, we can see we got like VM Linux 4.1214, okay, then LP 152832 lah. So from a quick Google search, right, this is very foreign to me lah. So I just dump it into Google. You can see some links to this distribution called OpenSUSE 15.1 lah. So further research into that shows you that you can download it as a OS. So that's what we are gonna do. So we download it. I use VirtualBox lah. So as what I said just now, just use VirtualBox. Just use a VM, download it, install the header, GCC, and DovTools, and then we can just verify the kernel version using uname. So next slide. Okay, so once all of that is done, right, this is like a screen grab from the terminal. Yeah, so once all of that is done, right, this is what you kind of see lah. So you can use ls to check that you have module.dwarf. Okay, then after that, what you can do is just zip the files found in boot /boot and this module.dwarf, then just send it out to your CTF machine to use it as a profile. Okay, yeah, more details can be found at the link there when you all see the slides later. So yeah, generate the plugin, pull it up. Okay, next. Yeah, just so using the plugin, sorry, back one slide. Yeah, using the plugin, right? You can just easily specify the profiles in -- plugins, and then when you when you use info, right, you grab the profile, you can see that the Linux OpenSUSE profile is there that you can use it, and you can use it already. So I'll just run through one very, very simple, straightforward Linux example since we don't really have any. So next slide. Okay. Yeah, so this is a very simple one that I got from some, I think 6 CTF, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, so just a very simple one. They just want to know what command someone used. You can just easily check the bash history. So we just use the command Linux bash, and then we have information on of the timestamp lah. So we can just grab the timestamp, and then yeah, we have the info already. Okay, then next. Okay, so IP address. For Linux, I think we use ifconfig for our to check our own machine address lah. Windows, what do you use, John? I can't remember. Is it
IP config.
conscan or something? IP config, right? Okay, IP
wait,
config.
as in
Yeah,
as in
so
the module, is it?
volatility. Yeah, volatility one.
I think should be
Yeah, then I need to.
need to go back the
It's
previous
not.
slide.
Yeah, it's not gonna be ifconfig, right? It's some other command. So yeah, just have to take note of the difference in commands. Yeah. So next we have. Yeah, this one is quite straightforward lah. I just have a command, like what you call it, process ID, and then we can just find the full command. Yeah, so this is very straightforward stuff. So moving on. So we'll go back to Windows. Okay, so this is actually from MemLab's lab 5 lah. So it's the lab 5 of what John was covering of the lab 1 just now. So this is the hint that we were given, right? Okay, so someone accessed files when they were not there lah. So names were not readable, composed of alphabets and numbers. So we can kind of tell that it's probably gonna be something like hex or base lah. So we can look out for those kind of strings as we're analyzing the memjump. Okay, so we go through the standard stuff. I'm just gonna skip the image info, all these kind of things. So we know there is a Windows profile lah. So what we do, right, is we can either use PSList. I use PX view here lah. It doesn't really make too much of a diff here. Okay, so we can see two processes that I would like to flag out lah, which is notepad.exe, which is all in caps. Why? So that's very suspicious because the correct one will be all lowercase lah. And also there's WinRAR lah. WinRAR I don't think is that sus, but it's worth looking into to see what kind of files that were open in WinRAR. So yeah, moving on. So we just take a look at what was open in WinRAR. We can use a CMD line to see what file was open. And then from here, right, we can see that there's this weird .rar file that was open. So I mean, from here, my thought process would be to go and find out what is this RAR file lah. So maybe we can dump it out. So here, right, we use file scan. Okay, so file scan dumps everything out. So I just grab that particular file name, and then we can find the address of that particular file. And we can use dump files. Sorry, I never changed the color of the command. Yeah, you can use dump files of that location and dump it out. I just dumped it out to the current directory I was in. So yep. So once it's dumped out, right, we can access the RAR file. But when you open it, right, it is password protected. So there's some other things that we need to look into lah. Okay. So we can try various methods around lah, but the one that was successful, right, for me was using IE history. Okay, so like John mentioned lah, mem forensics a lot of trial and error lah. So because this one we don't really know of any direction that we can head to, so we just probe around here and there, and then IE history gave us quite an interesting result here. So this was open in explorer.exe lah. So there was a file that resembles, I think, a base64 string the .bmp. So we try to decode the base64 string, and then we get the first flag from there. It doesn't really make any sense, but yeah, here it is. And then this flag then unlocks the RAR file, which gives us access to the PNG inside. Yep. So this is the solution. I would say it's quite straightforward. I mean, the IE history part is a little bit tricky, but once you got that right, I think it's generally quite straightforward already. Okay, so moving on, right? I'll do a one last example. And this doesn't involve volatility lah. So I think it's quite interesting, although I feel it's quite straightforward. So this one's actually from the CY Summit. I don't know if anybody went for it. So how it works, right, is they actually give us a lab server to connect to lah. So I don't need to run my own VM, and there were limited commands I can use. So this is what was given. A container is running in the lab. Flag file is supposed to be present in the home directory of the root user. Oops, there's two dots. The flag is a string of 32 hexadecimal characters. So I see container, so I thought Docker lah, and turns out it is lah. So we carry on. Okay, so just to note, right, we couldn't use volatility. I couldn't use volatility on this lab server. So I think this was the only way I could go lah. So I used Docker PS, right, to take a look at what was running lah, because they say containers mah. So from here, I can see container ID, all this kind of status information. So what was given in the hint was that the flag file, right, is in the root directory of the container that's running lah. So I was thinking, hey, why not I just cat the file that's in the root lah. So how we can do this is we can use docker execute exec lah. So we can quote the container ID and then we can run a command to the container. Okay, since it's a Ubuntu base, we can just use the commands that we know. So when I run ls, I see flag. So it's like, oh, that's easy. Okay, so then the next command I run obviously is cat flag. But guess what? The output was overwritten. So I was like, okay, that's not that easy. All right, so moving on. So some kind of we have to work our way around somehow or other lah, because going to the container directly is gonna be a dead end. So I don't know if you all know, but how Docker works is the containers are run using a build image lah. So there's some form of image creation that was required, and we can take a look at what kind of images they are currently stored on the system. So we can use Docker image ls to take a look at all the images that were created and stored on the system. And from earlier on, our Docker PS, right, we noted that the container that was running is running on the image called Ubuntu derived. So we can take a closer look into that particular image. So there's this command called docker history, which gives you the build history of the image and how it was built lah, from the Docker file. So from here, right, if we look through the file slowly, we can see some interesting lines like md5 sum bin bash to root/flag. Then the next thing you see is echo overwritten into root/flag. So we know that the current flag is containing, the current flag file contains overwritten. So very likely our flag is the line before, which is md5 sum/bin/bash. So what we can do here, right? Okay, so I think the problem, if I'm not wrong, is we cannot directly docker exec the container because we shouldn't be able to access the bin bash. It's out of like the Docker container scope. If I'm not wrong, don't quote me on this. So basically what I did, right, was I used Docker CP to copy out the entire OS out to my working directory lah. So once I copy out, so you can use the container address, and then I just use the dot to copy to my current address. So I have everything already. So it's more or less a done deal lah. So you just md5 sum the bin/bash folder, and then you get the flag. Yeah. So this one was quite weird because there isn't any use of volatility, or it's quite a little bit different from your standard mem forensics type of challenge, I feel lah, even though I haven't done that many. So it's quite interesting, but once you know like how it works, it's quite simple lah, I feel. Yeah. So I think that's about it for our presentation. John, would you like to add any final words?
Yeah, in no way really good lah, but hope you guys managed to pick out some stuff. I think, okay, just to add on, these are some resources. I think, okay, for mine, right, my favorite one is this. I think there's we included some with walkthroughs. This is my favorite, all-time favorite mem forensics challenge, because I think this one got some, there's certain portions where it's like got some raw file shit, then there was some like password. It's like an actual real life scenario kind of thing. So if the mem file is still around, right, please go and try it. It's really, it's super fun. I really love this challenge. If not, these are some of the resources that we took, and this Andrea Fortuna dude is really good. I will also add this Art of Memory Forensics thing that I got from Humble Bundle, the PDF into the Telegram chat. So if you guys want to read the 800-page manual, then you guys can go ahead. It's really quite interesting, but I died halfway through. I'm so sorry. Yeah, if not, that's it from us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, very nice. Can we keep the recording on for a while? See if anyone has any questions.
But someone say for Windows, I'm not sure if there's a Linux IF config alike module, but I can use connections to get all the connections, get local address. Oh.
I think so. I remember there was one command that could do that. Let me do a check.
Wait, GDC is a band?
No lah, I just anyhow say.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, mem forensics is always one of my favorite challenges, because I think the part is that, like, you can just whack. Usually you can just really go and whack, then just get lost in it. A lot of the other challenges I feel need more brain. Yeah, usually for mem forensics I just stumble onto the there's one time I found a flag from just strings the whole entire mem dump. It's ridiculous, because I think I spent 1 hour 15 minutes just looking through. I think the lines were like millions. It took time for Notepad++ to load the strings, the actual strings. So that was quite ridiculous. But I mean, usually there's a technique to most of this stuff. So I think that's why me and John decided to look at this, to try to figure out more of a science behind this TCAM procedure. And I think we have found a certain science to it. But got some areas when we are just stuck, then we just Hail Mary most of the time. Yeah.
It looks like don't have questions, or I'll just stop the recording now.
Okay.
Let's see if it